right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Share Screen Africa's Raptor Education series. For those of you that are new to the series, my name is Kalen Padiachi. I am from the KNAV Conservation Foundation, and I will be your host tonight on your raptor journey throughout Africa. I must apologize in advance. I am out at Golden Gate National Park, so the signal is a little bit sketchy. So if I lose you halfway through, the share screen team will take over and make sure that you continue your journey. So don't worry about that. But as I say, welcome. It's great to have you all back. I see some regulars in the audience tonight, and I'm glad you guys could all join us tonight because tonight is quite an exciting one. We're going to be talking about the hawks of the African continent, and we're going to be joined by some amazing speakers. First up, as our headline speaker is Anton Ordendal. He's an amazing birder, passionate about all types of birds, specifically the hawks of Africa. And then after that, we're going to be chatting to my mentor, the man who has played a huge role in molding me as a raptor biologist, and that's Dr. Gerard Malan. He's going to be talking to us a little bit more about his own very own experience with the PCGs of South Africa, or the pale chanting goshawks. Once we're done chatting with Gerard, we're going to move all the way to Kenya to visit with our resident raptor specialist, Simon Tomset, where he's going to give us an idea of what it feels like to get hands-on with these amazing birds of prey. Once again, guys, during the course of our series, we're going to be sending out those collectible raptor education posters that are completely free for you guys to use, download, and share to your heart's content. So please, 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 soon as you get them, start sharing them immediately on your social media, emails, whatever it is. The idea is to try and get these posters out there to help conserve these fantastic, amazing birds of prey that our continent has to offer. And for those of you that have missed maybe some of these episodes during the last couple of months, not to worry. You can get them all if you go to sharescreenafrica.org. We'll put it up in the chat. Go to their website, and you'll be able to get all the talks that have been presented up till today. You can rewatch the ones that you love the most, or catch up on the ones that you may have missed. Same thing with the posters. If you're missing a few of the posters for the last talks, not to worry. You can visit the KNAV Conservation Foundation's Facebook page. We have them all on the Facebook page for you guys to download, as well as sharescreenafrica.org. Cool. Without any further ado, I think it's time for me to introduce you to our headline speaker for tonight, and that would be Dr. Ordendal. Let me just get it. That's him right there on the screen. Anton is a phenomenal birder who lives and works in the Overberg and knows well all the birds and species that occur in that. He also offers some amazing birding courses that you can get a hold of. Remember to ask him about that at the end of the series, when we open the floor to you guys to chat more about. Any further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Dr. Ordendal. Anton, the floor is yours.
I feel a bit intimidated. I see Ulrich is in here, and Gerrit is in here. I'm not an ornithologist. I'm just crazy about birds. So I'll just talk you through my personal impressions of these magnificent hawks. Unfortunately, I've got to ask someone to go to the next slide each time, as my system is not working. Okay, if we then look at the so-called precipitous, as you ornithologists call it, they are truly amazing birds. As you can see here, this is a typical hawk with a short, broad somewhat rounded wings and the long tail. And this compares significantly from, for argument's sake, the eagles with the long, broad wings and the pertinent fingertips, the buzzards, the falcons. The point of the hawks is that they are stealthy hunters. They're medium-sized, small to medium-sized, with these short, broad wings and longish tails to enable them to move at speed and precision through dense vegetation and branches and stuff like that. It's just absolutely awesome to watch these birds. The only reason that I have feeders in my garden is to attract the birds so that the goshawks and the sparrowhawks can come and catch them, because it's just absolutely amazing to watch the strategy of these guys. They would be very secretive. They would come in and sit dead quiet, and then they would pounce on the sparrows and the doves and stuff like that, which it's a bit perverted, but I love watching it. It's just great. The immatures are completely different, as I'll show you throughout the talk. And then at rest, in most cases, the majority of cases, the folded wings do not extend to the tip of the tail, due to the fact that that tail is so long and the wing is so relatively short. And quite a few of them can run after prey on the ground. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as I've seen, it's mostly the goshawks. Could we please go on to the next slide? Okay, so the guys from Share Screen Africa changed my course to my talk so that we can just look at what is included here. Peculiarly, lizard buzzard forms part of the hawks, together with African harrier hawk, the gymnogene, as it was called in the old days, and then shikra and the goshawks and sparrowhawks. So this group of birds are very different. They differ tremendously in size, particularly if you look at the harrier hawk, the gymnogene, and how this compares with shikra, for argument's sake, and lizard buzzard, not to even speak of little sparrowhawk that is really a minute bird. So there's a whole variety of birds in terms of size and then behavior in this group, and this makes this group of birds so fascinating. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, if we just look at a few of the adults that are dominant in our area in southern Africa, the bar goshawk is in actual fact a smallish version of the southern pale chanting goshawk that we get down here in our area. Very similar, but they differ tremendously in size. And then the dark chanting goshawk, obviously a bird of the northeast of our country, Zululand and Kruger and those type of places, whereas southern pale chanting goshawk is far more bird of the west of our country. If we can go to the next slide, please. Adult sparrowhawks, little sparrowhawk is really, really a minute little bird. If you just look at this bird here, characterized by the very, very bright cere and the orange eye ring. This is an immature bird of the little sparrowhawk. And then we have black sparrowhawk, which is really an amazing bird in the sense that not only black sparrowhawk, but the majority of these birds had adapted tremendously to urban life over the last over the last 2, 3, 4 decades. I think the urban jungles, the Cape Towns and the Joburgs and the Pretorias and so forth, and cities further north in Africa have in time grown into urban jungles in the sense that there are now lots of trees, and these birds adapt to these urban areas, and that makes them so exciting. Due to the fact that you don't have to go out there into the wild, into the Karoo or wherever, to watch these birds. These birds are around. Next slide, please. These birds are sometimes very, very difficult to identify, particularly the young birds, the immature birds. And Ulrich, thank you for your the use of your markings on the raptors. It is really important to try, and particularly with the young birds, try and look at whether they are plain or uniform, whether they are barred, in other words, horizontal lines like a bar's door, and whether they blotched or spotted, etc. It's important for the identification of these birds to look at, particularly, as I said, the young ones, to look at the markings, particularly on the front of these birds. Holly had decided that we should change my talk to not concentrate on identification so much, but let's just make the point that the markings are crucial for the identification of these birds. Okay, next slide, please. And then she decided to just put in the physical characteristics of the birds. The cere is crucial in the identification of the vast majority of raptors in any case. Here you have the little sparrowhawk with a very bright yellow cere, and then the eye ring, and there is the young bird. You can also see it's a fairly bright cere with the eye ring. But then if you look at rufous-breasted sparrowhawk, and I think this slide is just absolutely perfect in illustrating this extended, long middle toe that is crucial in the way in which they will then hunt. So these terms are important, and if these talks are recorded, then it's no problem, because people can just look at the illustration here and go for it. If you could change to the next slide, please. I just pressed the next slide thing on my computer that doesn't work. This is a bird in our garden here in Onrus in Hermanus. It's an immature African goshawk, but I just use this to illustrate the very long tail with a short, broad, rounded wing and give it the dexterity to be able to maneuver at very high speeds through the vegetation, as you can see here. And these birds really like sitting on this wall fairly often and nailing the birds in our garden at our feeders. Also, I would like to illustrate the very small, delicate bill and the rounded head of these birds, and then the very long, thin legs, which in actual fact makes them completely different to the vast majority of other raptors. Okay, next slide, please. And then the variation in size, which is just amazing. If you look at this immature little sparrowhawk and the washing peg here, you can see how small this bird in actual fact is. Apologies for that. Here you can see a little sparrowhawk being held by and it's a friend of mine. You can see this is an old adult lady, with all respects to you, but you can see how small the little sparrowhawk is in actual fact. We are very excited down here in the Overberg, in the Western Cape. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we at our club BirdLife Overberg started counting all birds in the Overberg on a monthly basis. And we are now confirmed with photographs that little sparrowhawk, in actual fact, does occur in our area, which to us is great fun, because in the past they'd always been regarded as not a true Western Cape bird. They did occur on the garden route, but they are now down with us here in Hermanus and in Throbo. This photograph here shows a gabar goshawk giving a black harrier some grief, just illustrating the huge size discrepancy between the two species. Okay, next slide, please. These photographs just illustrate the secrecy of these birds. They would literally come in and park off and just wait very, very patiently before they shoot out from there at really high speeds to then catch their prey, which would usually be birds. Ovambo sparrowhawk is a really interesting species in the sense that in southern Africa, they are only common in Gauteng, which is Joburg and Pretoria, which is truly amazing. Lots of trees and cover to sit there and stealthily wait until they can pounce out from there. But they love hunting over open fields like sports fields, etc. And there are various areas in Johannesburg and Pretoria where you can often see them hunting over these sports fields, which is really an interesting adaptation. I'll speak about gabar as I go along. Okay, next slide, please. If we look at melanistic and leucistic birds, melanistic is the dark feathers, normally the black feathers. It is very, very common in gabar goshawk. If you go to Kalahari Transfrontier Park, for argument's sake, you are usually in with a very good chance of seeing these nearly pitch black gabar goshawks. And I'll show you some interesting slides on that later on. And then leucism, this is a partially leucistic shikra that I took in rain up at Punda. The yellow cere and the red eye with the white feathers, which is fairly interesting. These variations do occur, and as I said, in gabar's case, this is truly, it happens very, very often. Okay, next slide. Black sparrowhawks down here with us in the Western Cape tend to be fairly melanistic. A lot of them are literally black sparrowhawks, except for the tail, with a little bit of a white throat. But usually the black sparrowhawks have a lot of white in the chest that I will show you later on. Here you can see this amazing photograph that Holly included in this talk, with a melanistic male mating with a normally colored gabar goshawk. Here you can see that the cere and the tip of the bill remain the same color. And just interesting that as far as I can read in books and stuff like that and on the internet, it's very unpredictable to be able to suggest whether the offspring will be melanistic or not, but I'm sure Ulrich will be able to tell us more about that. Okay, next slide. Sexual dimorphism. As far as I can gather, the larger the birds of prey are, the bigger the size discrepancy between the female, the larger bird, and the male would be. Here you can see a pair of black sparrowhawks. You can see the significant size difference of the male, with the lady being fairly huge in comparison to him. And here you can see pale chanting goshawk, female, and the male. So there are wonderful theories about this. In my extended talk on hawks, I spent a lot of time on theories that John Mendelsohn and these guys had about the agile hunter male and the nest protecting female. But in terms of this talk, we haven't got enough time to look at that. But interesting theories coming forward about the size discrepancy between the males and the females. The next slide, please. Then the long legs is often used to be able to chase after prey on the ground. And here you can see the long legs of immature pale chanting goshawk and the gabar, which is in actual fact a miniature southern pale chanting goshawk, according to most of the specialists. Okay, next slide. Gerrit, I'm sorry, I'm now impinging on your talk and your specialist area, but I just simply love your pale chanting goshawks in the sense that their cooperative hunting with honey badgers and then with snakes, and in this case, one of Gary's photographs of a Cape cobra. Amazing that this bird would just walk along with a snake, hoping that the snake would put its head into a rodent's hole and hope that some of the rodents would hop out on the other side of the tunnel. Just absolutely incredible that guys are able to get these photographs. They are amazing in the sense that they are so opportunistic in view of getting these snakes and the gossip and the rattles to help them with their food. This photograph of Gary is I just love it. They were driving in Botswana in the Kalahari, and a big piece of their tire came off, and this immature pale chanting goshawk just simply pounced and gripped this piece of tire, I suppose thinking that it could be a snake of sorts or something in that line, but simply did not want to leave it. I just think this type of behavior is what makes birding just so exciting, and what makes these hawks just so incredibly exciting to watch. Amazing. And here, one of our club members got this photograph. We were guides, my wife and myself, at the Tankwa Birding Bonanza weekend a few years ago, and Elaine's team won the best sighting of the day, and this was this pale chanting goshawk getting this cobra and just lifting and eventually dropped it. Really amazing sighting. Next sighting. Next slide, please. This is one of the slides produced by Share Screen Africa. All that I want to illustrate here is that the gabar forms part of the pale chanting goshawk group, the chanting goshawks, but then the eastern chanting goshawk with a yellow sear is completely different in coloration from the bird that we get, the two birds that we get down here. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then cooperative hunting, which is really an interesting thing in these birds, but in the Kalahari, the gabar goshawks and the red-necked falcons often hunt together, as you can see in these photographs. This is a melanistic gabar with the red-necked falcon, and this photograph of Karen's just beautifully illustrates how this immature bird is literally hunting with the red-necked falcon. Really amazingly interesting behavior, and as far as we are concerned, or what I could establish, not being an ornithologist, it's very difficult to, in actual fact, explain why these birds actually do it. Next one, please. And then African harrier hawk and the so-called double-jointed kneecaps, and its amazing ability to hunt, a strategy that it has developed that really, as you can see, this is a huge bird hanging from a weaver nest, trying to extract the chicks from there. And then typical of the species is that they would clamber up these tree trunks in order to look into these holes and stuff in view of getting something to eat. Amazing behavior. That is a typical, that white band is very typical of the species, but they have this amazing ability to balance themselves. And as you will see from the next slide, which was included as well, that this is one of these species that in actual fact blush, if one can use that human terminology for it. Normally the bare facial skin that is yellow, but when it's excited, hunting, mating, etc., it goes often a very, very deep pink in the gymnogene or African harrier hawk. Next slide, please. But the big problem with this species is that the mostly gray adult bird is fairly easy to identify, but the immature birds are an absolute nightmare. I get a lot of photographs in my inbox to identify for people, and the urban dweller would see this large bird of prey, and normally brownish in coloration, and due to its size, it would immediately go to eagle. And when they go to the eagles in their bird books, they bug it because they just can't find anything like that. But if you look at these ridiculous variations in coloration of these slides that I have here, you can see this bird is molting towards adult plumage already, but they are incredibly confusing when they are immature. I estimate that about 90% of the raptor photographs that I get to identify are immature gymnogenes. Next slide, please. If I just look at the difference in coloration from the adult birds to the immatures, here you can see little sparrowhawk, beautiful little bird. And there is its immature bird. And there's the African gossie with the immature bird, taken by Richard here in Hermanus as well. Next slide, please. And again, here you can see dark chanting and pale chanting goshawks and their immatures. So you can see the tendency is for these immatures to be more browner in coloration, and that makes it incredibly confusing because very often some of the bird books don't have them illustrated in their immature variations. Okay, next one, please. And here you can see a black sparrowhawk. I mean, some people would want to go to some variation of the jackal buzzard even, but you can see the very big head in the immature bird. And there you can see again southern pale chanting, the adult and the immature bird. So there are huge variations in what the birds look like when they are immature compared to the adult birds. Okay, next one, please. Fantastic hunters. As you can see here, the black sparrowhawk that had taken a black-winged stilt. But just look at those talons into the chest of the bird. One must assume that possibly this bird's already dead. Here is the rufous variation of the immature black sparrowhawk, and you can see it here with a large pigeon that had caught, and here you can see rufous-breasted sparrowhawk with a laughing dove. So you can clearly see from this illustration that this bird is significantly smaller than black sparrowhawk. Next one, please. Grant Atkinson is one of my favorite bird photographers. And I just think this photograph of a gabar with the bee-eater sun carmine, again, you can see the function of these incredibly long toes in order to be able to be real killing machines as it is. And interestingly enough, yeah, it is trying to drag it away on its one leg, which is, as far as I'm concerned, really cool. Next one, please. And then just some that are really true forest specialists. African cuckoo hawk, which is a bird that is fairly difficult to find due to its secretive behavior. The two red markings on the nape is significant and a real unique feature of the species. And interestingly enough, you just look at the short toes compared to what I've shown you this far. This bird really likes chameleons, which is really peculiar in the sense that they really like hunting chameleons, which is interesting. Next one. Ollie decided that she wants to include this because she listened to my previous talk, but interesting behavior in shikra that occurs from Asia through most of Africa. The yellow seer with the red eye is really distinctive. Here you can again see a bird that's in a way partially leucistic with the immature bird, but interesting behavior. I don't know the scientific word or the word that you ornithologists use, but she won't allow him to mate unless he feeds her, which is behavior that occurs in quite a few birds of prey, but really interesting in shikras. Another interesting thing of this bird is that they use a lot of bark when they build their nests. And also a bird that prefers lizards as its main food source. Next slide, please. And then the bat hawk. This photograph of Andrews just absolutely perfectly illustrates this thing. I think the Americans based their stealth bomber on the design of this bird in flight. For a species to feed predominantly on bats, but then also on swifts, it's really amazing of creation that a bird could adapt to use such prey species. And look at the incredibly wide gape in this species as well. The large yellow eye is distinctive of it. Next one. And here, Andre got a pair in a photograph, which I really love and think it's really cool. The younger the birds, the more prominent the white in the throat is. Next one. Okay, I'm very close to the end. Gabar goshawk have this incredible behavior in the sense that they harvest these spider nests, a lot of spiders in that whole ball of spider webs, and they then put this onto their nests, and in actual fact, the nest in the end gets totally covered by these spider webs, as I'll illustrate in the next slide, please. And there you can see an adult bird incubating, and there you can see the chicks on the nest. Again, my attempt to really understand why they in actual fact do this has come to nothing. There are quite a few theories, from protection, from keeping pests away, etc. But really peculiar behavior. And this, to me, is what makes the hawks so interesting. There are just so many interesting things about them. And one can just not stop trying to fathom what goes on with these hawks. Next one, please. And then just looking at flight patterns, normally birds of prey would fly over you, and therefore the flight patterns would be important in their identification. But as you can see, there are significant differences in the wing formation if you look at bat hawk, because it's just such a unique bird. Just another question that I want to raise. I often get asked why some eagles are called hawk eagles, the Ayers and the African hawk eagle. They are sort of hawkish in what they look like or their design, and hawkish in terms of their behavior. They have longer tails compared to the majority of other eagles, and shorter, broader, more rounded wings. And funnily enough, they predominantly feed on birds. The Ayers hawk eagle go for doves and pigeons, and the African hawk eagle predominantly the game birds, the francolins, the spurfowls, etc. Next slide, please. And just look at this magnificent photograph of a gabar and the very tight bars, lines in its coloration. Really cool. And then the difference between the immature black sparrowhawk on the right here compared to rufous-breasted sparrowhawk, the larger extent of the auburn reddish coloration in the immature rufous sparrowhawk, and the white vent in the case of the rufous-breasted sparrowhawk. And as you can see, the barring is far more dense in the rufous-breasted sparrowhawk. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm at the end. I think as far as the flight patterns and go, it's really crucial that in the identification of these birds, we look at good bird of prey books like Ulrich's raptor books in view of assisting you to identify. I think I am now at my slide to just thank. You can go to the next one, please. And I need to express my appreciation to all the people from whom I had bummed photographs for this talk. I thank you for your patience. I will hang around for the questions, and you're most welcome to ask me for questions later on after the next two talks. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anton. That was really such a great kind of just deep dive into the hawks of Africa. You know, I found it quite interesting. I didn't actually know that those cuckoo hawks were so or preferred chameleons. That's quite an interesting thing. Interesting thing to hear. So, as always, guys, we're going to move on to our next speaker, but I hope you guys keep all your questions because Anton's going to be here for the remainder of the series. So I'd like you to we'll open the floor to the rest to the audience at the end of this talk. The next speaker that we have in line, it's a little bit different tonight than what we have it normally. The next speaker is actually here live and is going to be chatting to you in person about his very, very unique experience with one of the hawks of Africa, which is, of course, the pale chanting goshawks. It is my absolute pleasure to hand you over to Dr. Gerard Malan. As I said in the beginning, Gerard is my mentor. He was my supervisor for a lot of my work that I've done on Varro's eagles in South Africa. So it is absolutely to hand you over to Gerard. Gerard, the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself and share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kalen. Yeah, I obviously taught ecology at Tshwane University of Technology. Kalen was a student there. Probably the friendliest student I ever had out of 30 years of teaching at various universities. So very, very fortunate to have him organize this. So he gave me a few minutes. I said, what must I talk about? He said, it's just something. Okay, so I thought maybe talk about my favorite bird, pale-chanting goshawk, and the problem that they have with nest predation in my study area in the Little Karoo. I got involved with nest site selection and where birds breed through a donation of SAPI. They gave me quite a lot of money to look at black sparrowhawks in their plantations. You know, where do they nest? What can they do about it? It's obviously quite a spectacular bird, as you heard from the previous speaker. Very adaptable. I've had nests on mudflats in KwaZulu-Natal, right at the sea, you know, within 30, 40 meters from the waves, on top of Soutwansberg. Very cold areas, warm areas. Of course, the popular groves at the bottom left in the Karoo, you know, I can't drive past those things anymore. Oh, I have to stop. Even my wife gets a bit bored after a while because I have to look and see if and normally there is a black sparrow nest out there in the middle of the sticks. But it turned out black sparrowhawks are edge nesters and they just go inside the edge where the conditions are quite placid, and that's where they'll nest. Then I also looked at crown eagles. I had about 25 nests in KwaZulu-Natal when I was teaching there. The bird on the left is old Nico Myberg, if you can remember him. That's his female. And this nest is just below the Botanical Gardens in Pietermaritzburg. There's not a cat or a dog. It's a very, very quiet neighborhood. And these birds, they go for big staunch trees that they won't fall down. So that was the common denominator for all the nests. But I want to talk about pale-chanting goshawks. This is a female. You can see the nice large diameter tarsus or the legs, and quite difficult to say why I like them, but I think they quite serious birds. They don't joke or run around and joke like the accipiters do, but they are very intelligent birds because they make a living out of the harshest conditions. My study area way back in 1988, when I was still a master's student, ended up being in the Little Karoo between Carlersdorp and Oudtshoorn. That was the highest density of pale-chanting goshawks we could find in southern Africa. After I drove Namibia, Botswana, the whole lot was right there at just not behind the mountain here. There's the, obviously looking north, there's a Spotberg mountain range at the top, which is now partly white, and my study area in blue below. Just to give you, you'd actually drive through there with a tar road. So my aim for this talk is just to look at these birds nest in these low woody vegetation. Basically, that's all that there are. It's an arid area, so it's quite different from others. And I think they avoid predation, or specifically nest predation, by having nests that are less accessible and conspicuous. But it's quite academic, exactly what makes a difference. They make quite a large nest. This one, they normally about 50 by 50 centimeters and about 20 centimeters high. This nest is ostrich dung, lined with ostrich dung. Very little or very few sheep in that area, mostly ostriches, so they have to use the lining. There's a rare nest lined with sheep wool. There was a sheep kraal at the edge of the territory, and they use that. So they use, as you know, by far most birds use green leaves lining, but there's a few birds that use these pale colored insulating material. And by the way, they also use the social spider nest, the Stichodipus spider nests, but not nearly as often or as an high frequencies as the Kabar. I think it's just another insulating material. And the 1,000 spiders just come along for the ride. There's no sinister reason why they should bring the spiders to the nest. It's purely for lining. Right, so down there in the Little Karoo, nest predation, or specifically nestlings, is very high. Actually, 19% of my nests gets killed when the chicks are on the large size. There you can see one without a head. If we just go back to the study area, there's a spekboomveld, as you know, from the Eastern Cape. Spekboom is now such a cool or an in plant, but there's lots of spekboom, quite dense, very little open areas, but quite a few pale-chanting goshawks in there. Then Karoo Brokenveld, which is the real pale-chanting goshawk heaven. First of all, there is bush rats there that makes these stick nests under thorny shrubs. There's whistling rats that live out in the open. They nest on these they make nests on these juweltjies. There's lots of shrubs and trees, but not too many, so that the goshawks can sit on them. And there's quite a bit of open ground to chase the rodents. And then there's succulent karoo, which is basically the karoo that you know. You only find polechander and goshawks in the study area where there's lots of fence posts and little trees. And if it's just a very open area, you won't find polechander and goshawks. Right. I thought I'll sneak in a bit of predators. These species, the polechander and goshawks, are very, the polechander and goshawks are very afraid of them. It's quite difficult to explain what is a polechander and goshawk, but that's a bird that flies in circles and screams continuously, or try and get away, or flying at the predator, so behaving very abnormally. Martial eagle, there was a nest in this, or there still is a nest inside the study area. If the martial, male or female, flies through the study area, you can get pair after pair after pair of polechander and goshawks trying to chase this bird away. So I don't know if they eat the chicks. White-necked ravens. It's not a particular big bird. I saw 2 days ago, I saw one appear near Oudtshoorn. I mean, they're quite common. They're about the same size as a polechander and goshawk. When they see a Cape crow or a white-breasted crow, they quite laid back, no problem. But these white-necked ravens, they fall over when they see the polechander and goshawk see them. Yellow mongoose. Yellow mongoose is a laid back. The polechander and goshawks get very upset when they see a yellow mongoose. I think they look like something far more sinister. I don't think they cause their problems, but the goshawks absolutely very scared of them. Then the two real culprits, probably the ones that are really scared, Cape genet, common genet. Cape genet is in more open areas. I had even Cape genet sleeping in old polechander and goshawk nests. So walk through the veld, you can see the ears of the genet as they sleep in the nest. And then the common genet is where it gets more dense in the spekboom veld, and quite a lot of them. You see them quite regularly when you drive around at night. African wildcat, because of all the rodents, they're very plentiful. And then also you have to go out there at night, nocturnal caracal, which you see. So all these potential predators around, but which one is the culprit, I actually don't know. So I just want to introduce you now to some variables. So the first thing I looked at was nest tree height. So I hope you can see the nest there. I didn't actually put an arrow. So compare that with random nests in a 25-meter circle. The nest trees were significantly taller at sort of 4.5 meters, where the random trees around them were about 3 meters. So they were taller. And the successful nests, the ones that are raised chicks, were also 1 meter taller than the unsuccessful nest trees. So tree height, or the nest height, plays a role. The number of plants. There's a nest which is a shrub tree with a spekboom in it. I think there's 5 species in that nest structure. 5 plant species, that is. If you count the plant parasites and the creepers. So the nest clumps where the birds nested had about 2 species on average, whereas the random clumps around that were 1.4. So there was a selection for more than one plant species. But funny enough, no difference between successful or unsuccessful nests. So they had equal number of plants. Then tree shape was the interesting one. Trying to see, this is a typical dome shape. You can see the nest on the top left. Typical dome shape, very dense, thorny shrub. So must be quite difficult for a predator to get up there from the ground, but I don't know from the top. Then irregular shape. This is just below on the right, above that bucky, you can see a regular shaped tree, you know, a little main branch at the bottom, but irregular shape with branches and sticks all over. So that's what the goshawks really preferred. So most nests, the irregular shape, that was their big selection, and dome shape 42. So that will give you 94% of the nest trees were in these unusual shaped trees. They didn't go really for the very common shaped trees. But in Spekboomveld and Karotbrokenveld, the shape had no impact on nest success. It's only when you go to the succulent karoo where you get drainage lines and these big acacia karoo trees. It's probably because, well, I think that its dome shape and the branches lie on the ground. It's just quite difficult to climb those trees. Anyway, that's my idea. Nest protection. If you stand on the ground and look up at the nest, it was in most cases quite difficult to see the nest from the ground. So as a predator, a mongoose or a genet probably have the same impact. Most nests, high protection at 86%, intermediate 14%, and low 18%. So there was very open nests as well. But no difference between successful or unsuccessful nests. So perhaps for me, looking up at the nest, I thought it was protected, but maybe not for the predators. Right, so if I can just conclude my discussion, just as a summary, nest height, taller trees were more successful. Tree shape, it made a difference. It was a dome-shaped tree. It had less of a predation problem. Protection was very high throughout, no big difference between them. And the number of plants also seemed to play a role. If that was for protection or just having a nice green, carpet to put a nest on, I don't know. Okay, so I think I had 22 or 23 of these, found these juvenile. It's just about to fledge. You pick up the two talons, the feathers, and the rest is all gone. Or always in a nice little heap like that. So to conclude, the seasonal breeding pattern of the pale-chanting goshawk, so they breed now in early summer. So tall trees make a difference. Dome-shaped trees add more protection, but it doesn't seem to be good enough. There seem to be still predators that could work out where the pale-chanting goshawk youngsters were. And I conclude that offspring or pale-chanting goshawk offspring is an unpredictable food source for opportunistic predators. It seems to be a bit of a random effect, and I couldn't find a real variable that tells me that separates the successful versus the unsuccessful nests. Right, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Harold. That's an awesome insight into the PCGs, as we call them, right? I think it's a very undervalued bird. It's you see them, especially in that area. They're so common, almost like blackwing kites up on the Highveld, right? But very, very, very cool birds nonetheless. Thank you for that. I think what we're going to do is move straight on to our virtual field trip with Simon Thompson out in Kenya, where he's going to show you some of these hawks in person. So I think Johan, or is it Prudence, you can go ahead and play that virtual field trip for us.
Accipiters in general are fast pursuit tail chasers, and And as you can see, he's got very short wings, long tail. His tail's still growing. He's probably got another 1.5 centimeters to grow. I taped it up here just to stop him from crushing it whilst he's being trained. So these can accelerate like a rocket. We were watching one yesterday, a released one, just fly right across the entire landscape there, just going flawlessly, straight up. I mean, unbelievable strength. Very few raptors on Earth have that kind of speed. This actually is one of the most extreme of all the raptors, this ability to fly down some of the fastest birds on Earth. And unlike most accipiters, this is not just restricted to forests. This will also occur in open landscapes. We saw a black sparrowhawk yesterday. He was an adult. She is about 4 years old. She also came in with her brother as a wind-blown thing. She is at hack, and I guess in total she's been at hack for about a year. I hacked her about 6 months, about 2 years ago. And she sticks around here and this is home to her. So she's even trying to build a nest. But we saw her do a territory kind of fly, which was a very exaggerated deep wing beat. Kind of head up, body just going with big, deep wing beats. Very obvious, this is me. They can occasionally do undulating flights. Another thing that she was doing yesterday, which was fluffing out her under tail feathers. That's a bit of a subtlety. Northern goshawks will do that as well. At the beginning of the breeding season, they seem to sort of fluff out their under tail covers. So yeah, she's actually quite a threat to this guy. Who knows, she may come straight in here and try to kill it or adopt it. Accipiters can have 1 to 6 chicks, black sparrowhawks. I've seen them with 5 chicks. And obviously when you've got 5 chicks sitting in a small nest, it's very few of the smaller ones are going to make it. She was in a rather typical nest, which is only 2 individuals. Interestingly about black sparrowhawks, I've seen them have, 2-3 individuals per nest, but 3 seasons in 1 year. They don't need to have a season. We're on the equator. There's no real doves, for example, their major prey, will nest any time of the year in Kenya, and multiple times that they nest, even up to about 6 times easily for something like a collared dove, if the conditions are right. If they are, these guys will also breed just as fast as their prey. So we have a totally different set of rules on the equator. This with its female right now, his sibling, probably still very much together, squabbling on the nest, flying around, being buddies. There'll come a time though when they have to disperse from the nest. The parents will actively ignore them or just fly away from them. And that can take, a matter of weeks sometimes for them to disperse, or sometimes maybe as much as 6 months. I know one nest at Kijabi that's, despite the fact that they're producing many chicks a year, will have youngsters begging from the parents, whilst the parents have got young chicks in the nest, so they can be begging from their parents for about 6 months. It's completely different here compared to normal northern goshawk nesting behavior in the temperate world. It's a good study species, understudied, relatively common, although declining rapidly. Sexy, charismatic bird, but largely ignored. I've seen barn owls, probably a clutch of barn owls, one after the other, get killed by these guys. So you go underneath their nest, there's barn owl remains. African goshawks, certainly. They have no compunction of taking cuckoo hawks, I remember. And they got pictures of one on a camera trap on a kite in Karura Forest. I kind of was of the opinion that the kite wasn't doing very well. It may have been electrocuted or something. But yeah, birds of prey do predate other birds of prey if they have the chance. Accipiters are those birds with short wings, long tail, and they're about 200 odd globally, and they all share exactly that in common. Most of them are extremely nervous, highly caffeinated group of birds, literally looking over their shoulder, terrified if they're going to be predated, or immediately take an opportunity to go hunting. So they very seldom sit out in open locations waiting to get predated. They're represented globally as goshawks and sparrowhawks, and the term comes from Old English, Medieval English, pre-medieval English, which has it that a sparrowhawk is a small hawk capable of taking a sparrow, and that a goshawk is a hawk capable of taking a goose, which kind of puts things in a nice way, but they're all very closely related. We get confusions here in Africa where you have a bird such as the African goshawk, which is much smaller than the black sparrowhawk, so it's the reverse of what you would think. However, it's all comes down to looking at the length of their middle toe. The African goshawk has a short middle toe, very much like the northern goshawk counterpart. In many ways looks like a miniature northern goshawk. Whereas the black sparrowhawk middle toe is extremely long and looks very much like the northern sparrowhawk's middle toe. Also has a similar sort of smaller face. It gets very complicated when you start to go across the world and look at things like the mayor's goshawk, which actually is a black sparrowhawk but with a shorter middle toe. It gets very complicated indeed. The best thing to do is to consider all accipiters as to being very quite closely related group of birds, and then outside of that is the group of hawks, which usually come under, say, the genus Buteo, and those hawks would be in English called buzzards. So buzzards are basically hawks, and in many ways a sparrowhawk and a goshawk is a hawk. The term hawk is just a generic word used for all the birds other than eagles, falcons, kites, and some other specific ones, such as fishing eagles. Short middle toe means that you're a mammal killer, have incredible grip. Long middle toe means you're like the American baseball. Their catcher has a huge glove. So the bigger, the wider the surface area you have, the more likelihood you're going to catch something in midair. So this is a specially made bird catching foot, very long middle. The other interesting thing is that you can see the talon bends over and you see those two fleshy protuberances. They're joining up together in the middle of the toe. That actually meets together. So that actually acts like two fingers pinching, not just the talon pinching. So the whole toe is really meant to catch something. The fleshy thing just as important as the talons. You can tell immediately you catch a raptor that you don't really even know. In fact, when you're doing identification, there comes a time when you're going to go, shoot, I don't know what it is, let me look at the length of the middle toe. Immediately you see that, you know it's a bird hunter or a mammal hunter. Sometimes lizard hunters and snake eagles, for example, who eat snakes and lizards, have a very, very short middle toe. But their grip is enormous, so they're very good at catching a hose pipe. A small diameter thing, the grip is enormous. They wouldn't be having anywhere near the same amount of grip if they had long toes. So you have one snake eagle called a battler, who's definitely a snake eagle, that has a long middle toe. You got to question why. Why would a battler have a long middle toe? So by having that question, because you're looking at its taxonomy, you're going to be able to go, it must be eating birds. Does it eat birds? And you find out later that it does. Chanting goshawks are an African endemic. They are long, dapper, very neat looking group of hawks with long legs. They're quite good for running. They have, weirdly, a round nostril like a fast falcon with a similar little protuberance in the middle of it. Very fleshy face and fleshy legs too, which are often brightly colored orange or yellow. They have long tails and medium short wings. They stand very proud on the top of open promontories like dead trees and anthills. So there are three chanting goshawks. One is called the Eastern chanting goshawk, which occurs in Africa and Eastern Africa. And then there's the dark chanting goshawk, which is kind of separated in Kenya by the Great Rift Valley, occurring pretty much to the west of it, and then across into Africa with a small isolated population, probably extinct now in Morocco and Mauritania. In southern Africa, just south of the Mopani-Miombo woodlands, is the much larger pale chanting goshawk, and that bird goes up to about 1 kilogram. What is endearing about them is that they literally do chant, and they sing in the evening, and it's a very melodious call. Its miniature cousin, the Gabar goshawk, looks the spitting image of, say, the Eastern chanting goshawk. And it also has an oddly melodious call, but rather quick, as you would expect from something much smaller. But that has been put into a genus of its own, but everybody recognizes that it's very closely related to the chanting goshawk. The other one is the lizard buzzard, that in every respect looks like a rather lazy version of the chanting goshawk, with a shorter tarsus, shorter tail, and rather longer wings. That's pretty phlegmatic and laid back, sits in quite exposed places too. It likes sitting on telegraph lines looking for lizards. It is actually a very understudied group of hawks with no really close relatives. It is not related to the accipiters, although it's very accipitrine looking. It looks like an accipiter in many ways, behaves like one.
Fantastic. Well, that was Simon Thompson out in Kenya with the hawks of his own. And that brings us to my favorite part of the evening, and that is, of course, the audience questions. To understand, we all get a chance to have a chat with our specialists tonight. So I do apologize with the load shedding. I've got a few questions that came through. The first one from Pilon at Gerard. He wants to know, do mongoose differ from dwarf mongoose?
Well, in my study area, there's no dwarf mongoose. There's only yellow mongoose. But
No
the places that I've seen them, they differ quite a lot. I mean, the dwarf is much darker and much smaller. The dwarf mongoose is a little gabar goshawk, a little sparrowhawk, little mean little thing with lots of energy. So the yellow mongoose is very widespread, and it's quite laid back. Like I said, I don't know why the goshawks are so scared of it. I don't see it as a predator, but perhaps it's just the shape. They see that shape and they start chanting and flying around in circles.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I'll add to that, Pilani. Yeah, they're definitely different species. So you've got your yellow mongoose is a different to your dwarf mongoose, and as I mentioned, there's certain parts of the country where you will only find one difference between those two species. The next question from Nicolay, I think Nicolay, his question is there any form of interspecifical competition between your pale chanting goshawk, black sparrowhawk, and African goshawk? I guess that's for either one of you, Anton or Gerard, whichever would like to ask that, would like to answer that.
Yeah, of course. The Anton can ask the answer the two, the black sparrowhawk and the African goshawk, but the pale chanting goshawk runs on the ground, like he pointed out. They got these long, strong legs, and they chase rodents on the ground, and they catch them. So there's no competition between them and any other raptor.
Okay, thanks for that, Harold. The next question we have from Jared is a question for Anton. Would hawks, when hunting with other animals, steal food from those other because they are opportunistic?
Okay, all right. Just to go back to the African goshawk, black sparrow issue, there's a really interesting study being done on the Cape Peninsula at the moment, where it seems as if as the trees go larger and it becomes a better environment for black sparrowhawks, they are in actual fact apparently displacing the African goshawks. It seems as if there's an increase in numbers in the black sparrowhawk and a decrease in numbers in terms of the African goshawk. The last question, I haven't got clear indications to be able to answer that. What I can say, however, is that we find that the black sparrowhawks in our area are increasingly mobbing and harvesting heron nests. In our area at the Vermont Salt Pan, for argument's sake, we have several times witnessed one
All right, thank you very much, Anton. I see Marty has his hand raised. Would you like to ask your question, Marty?
How's it, guys? Thanks again for interesting talk. I think a lot of facts there that you won't find in our bird book, so it was very interesting. Just a quick one, and I hope I'm not messing up with my memory from a couple of talks back, but I think it was Simon who mentioned that the female, I think it was the crowned eagle or the marshal, is almost like a whole different bird in terms of the way, I think it was the crowned, it behaves and hunts and what it hunts compared to the male. And I know with these goshawks and things, there's sexual dimorphism as well. I'm just interested if you can kind of give us some more information about that sexual dimorphism. Is it purely to be able to carry eggs, that the bird is bigger, or are there other sort of reasons why, and do they behave differently, the larger female than the male? Maybe some other facts that aren't in the book that you can share with us.
If I could try and answer that, not having my original talk in front of me with the text, and as I recall it, the male is this is the theory of John Mendelsohn and these guys. The male needs to hunt, needs to provide the food, and is therefore far more agile and able to get the prey effectively. And the female is far more on the nest most of the time, and therefore able to protect the nest. So it was like the fast, good hunter male and the large protecting female at the nest. And it's an interesting theory, and I can hunt it down and look it for you. Just email me and I will try and get the original text of that theory and forward it to you. Just email me at birding@overberg.co.za.
Perfect. Thanks, Anton.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Anton. We got another question from Pilani, who wants to know how long does it take for a pale chanting goshawk to build a nest? I think that's directed to you, Kara.
Yeah, it takes if they can build every day, it takes about 3 weeks. But normally they get a bad day for hunting, maybe a windy day. They birds that are, because they sit on top of vegetation, they're quite sensitive to wind, actually. And so if there's the windy days, then they have poor success in hunting, then they stop building for a while. So it gets up to 4 or 5 weeks, but normally 3 weeks. Then they build a completely new nest.
3 weeks. That's quite quick, actually. That's quite impressive.
Can you reveal something about the so-called legendary gripping power of the foot and the talons of the African crowned eagle? I'm from Eastern Europe. I'm not familiar with this species. Only what can I know about this bird is due to internet. But we have golden eagles here, and I read that this species, which is a little smaller than an European golden eagle, it's much more stronger, I mean, in terms of gripping power. How strong is this bird actually? Did they do some measurements, or just like I say, folklore, legends, things like that? Thank you very much for your kindness.
Yeah, I didn't, as far as I know, nobody's really looked at crowned eagles and the talon grip in particular. but they are very strong. If you look at a carcass of a crown eagle or the bone structure, and you measure the size of the foot or the talon versus any other bone, you can see that they got massive feet, which they use to, well, obviously when they catch prey, they can really literally squeeze the life out of them. If you compare that to black eagles and martial eagles, relatively to the body size, the martial and the black eagle is smaller. But what the actual grip is, I don't know.
Are there any other questions for our experts tonight?
If I can just say something about the cooperative hunting by the gabar and the redneck falcon. I
Yes.
would, you
Go
know,
ahead.
we looked at it at one stage when I was working in the Kalahari on sandgrouse of all things. But I drove around with Quitty Herald, and we looked at these two species, and the success rate of each species is about 50%. There's not, when they cooperative hunt like that, there's not one species that really stands out. But it's pretty amazing. So you have this long-winged, sharp-winged redneck falcon, so typical fast-flying falcon, and this short, broad-winged gabar goshawk. So the gabar goshawk will, or the redneck falcon for that, but let's just say the gabar goshawk picks up a dove or a little small LBJ and then chases it inside a tree structure. So inside the branches, inside the canopy, the gabar goshawk will chase it, and the redneck falcon will just fly in a circle around this tree, looking what's going on inside, and obviously not going inside because it's not its hunting habitat. And eventually the little dove will gap it, if I can use that word, and fly out of the tree and across an open area to the next tree. And when it does that, the redneck falcon will fly in behind it and chase it. And if the dove gets to the next tree without being caught, then the gabar goshawk is there, and this whole process starts all over. And we looked at I think about 20 of these cooperative chases, and half of them, the gabar caught the dove, and the other half, the redneck falcon caught it. So there's well, the obvious is there doesn't seem to be any benefit for a single species doing this cooperative hunting. Very different, to aerial predators, but if they work together, they can actually catch the prey. Very interesting.
Gerard, thank you very much. Anton, yeah. I always talk about this phenomenon. My kop is te plat om hierdie goed te verstaan. And it's really, thank you for that. That it explains a lot to me. I've wondered about that for about 20 years now.
Yeah, definitely a fascinating behavior. Thanks for clearing that up, Gerard. As I look over the screen, I do not hands. So I think I'd like to thank you both, Gerard and Anton. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge with us. But it's been an absolute pleasure listening to both of you speak. I do apologize for the mishaps in sound quality. For everybody that's joined place same time, we're going to have another panel of experts speaking about even more exciting African raptors. So I think with that, I'd like to say goodnight to you all. Gentlemen, have a great night. And we'll see you back here next week.